And oh yes, we have got it. It is now live. Welcome everybody. I've just given a welcome to everybody in the Zoom room, and I'm giving a welcome to people watching on YouTube. This is Scrutiny Live, part of Scrutiny Week from TPAS, and Scrutiny Clubs are part of the offer that TPAS give to people who are scrutineers up and down the length and breadth of the country. And we are joined at the moment by close to 25, but more are coming in at the moment, scrutineers from across the country. And this afternoon, we will be looking at the new tenant satisfaction measures, what that means, and for scrutineers, what it could mean for scrutineers, and having some discussion. For those watching on YouTube, I do have to warn you in advance that there may be about 20 to 25 minutes when you won't have anybody on screen, because I'm going to split people up into groups. People who've been to Scrutiny Group before will know this. So I'm about to share my screen. I'm going to talk for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we're going to split up and go into discussion groups. So let me just share my screen. Oh, Zoom, that's not the one I want. I want something else. Hold on. Cancel that a minute, like all good technology. Right, can people see that now?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it showing just the full screen with tenant satisfaction measures on it?
No, there's two.
There's two screens.
Yeah.
Aims for today on the right.
Yeah.
Aims for today. Okay, let me see if I can just. Apologies for this. Display settings. Is it full screen now?
Yes. Tenant satisfaction measures.
Wonderful. Here we go. Right. The aims of today are to catch up on what's been going on before with regards to tenant satisfaction and the Decent Home Standard. Ricky, you have your hand up.
I can get on. I don't know if anybody can see me.
That's fine, Ricky. We can see you. That's fine.
Right, no problem.
I can hear you.
We can hear you well.
Wonderful. To catch up on what's gone before, to look at tenant satisfaction measures, and to look at how it's going to work with regards to the new regulation of social housing that's taking place. So let's have a look at the journey of where we've got to so far. For many of you, you'll know there's been a green paper, a white paper, and now a social housing regulation bill. And how that's come about is with loads of road shows with ministers, many, many housing ministers, some now gone, consultations and briefings. We've had briefings with the Regulator of Social Housing, we've had briefings with the Housing Ombudsman, and we've had briefings from central government. And some of you have taken part, and lots of tenants have taken part, with the tenant satisfaction measures. Over 650 tenants actually had input into that. And what came about was the Charter for Social Housing Residents. What were the key themes of the Charter? It was safety, performance, complaints, respect, consumer regulation, your voice heard, and quality home and neighbourhood. So let's have a little bit more of an in-depth look at what was contained within those standards. Safety. Safety of the home as a regulatory objective. Something very important, particularly in the light of the Grenfell tragedy that led partially to the creation of this bill. Identify a health and safety lead for each provider. Again, one of the things that came out of the Grenfell inquiry was that there wasn't a clear identified person where the buck stopped with regards to health and safety issues. New electrical safety standards. Now, I should mention in the tenant satisfaction measures, there isn't a reference to electrical safety standards because the government is currently about to undertake a consultation, and we'll add that into the review later. Performance. There's going to be new tenant satisfaction measures that I'll go on to, which will actually measure how tenants are feeling about the services they receive against the consumer standards. There's going to be an access to information scheme for social housing. And for those who live in council housing, that's actually quite something you've lived for a long time, because you've had that in the Freedom of Information Act. But social housing tenants are going to have that now. There's going to be a published spending breakdown of what your housing provider spends their money on. And there'll be published tenant satisfaction measures that I've mentioned we'll go into. Complaints. There's going to be a beefed up complaints code, much stricter, much tougher, much more requirement for the housing provider to give evidence. There is an advisory panel now on complaints that has been set up by the Ombudsman. There's going to be more promotion and a requirement for landlords to promote the services that are available for those tenants that wish to make a complaint. And also removal of the democratic filter. For those who don't know what the democratic filter was, that was a way you could lodge your complaint with a councillor like myself, or with a dedicated tenant panel, or an MP, or other elected official. That doesn't mean you still can't approach those people to act on your behalf, but it's not an option within the system now. Now, the consumer regulations also had the removal of the serious detriment test, and that's particularly important because the consumer standards, the tenant involvement and empowerment standard in particular, needed things to go disastrously wrong before anything was done with regards to upholding the rules on consumer standards. This has now been taken away. And what will happen is the consumer standards will be treated exactly the same as the financial and the governance standards, and will be up to similar penalties and similar restrictions and similar tasks given to landlords by the regulator if they fail to deliver. There'll be a new requirement to give 48-hour notice on the inspections, to give more time and to give time for the regulator to actually look at properties. If a landlord is unable to respond to a regulator request for repairs, the regulator is enabled to conduct their own emergency repairs on properties. There's appeals some there. There was a move towards unlimited fines as well. And what will happen is that tenants will have the ability to compare providers. You will have the way where you can go, and in Scotland they have this online. They're still working out the finer details of this in England, but on Scotland you can go online and put in your details of your provider, and 2 to 3 others will come up and you can compare how they're performing against other providers of similar size. The importance within the bill about having your voice heard. This was actually expressed by lots of tenants who went to many of the different roadshows and took part in the consultations. Landlords are now required to look at landlords that are doing this well and seek out best practice not just from landlords, but from outside the sector as well, on where they're seeing best practice work, where people's voices are being enabled, and they're going to be encouraged by the regulator to take that best practice on board and use it within their housing provider. There is already set up, and I believe some people in the room belong to it, an advisory panel for the regulator as well. And that involves tenants, but there's also going to be another advisory panel of what they call professionals as well. And I believe there's some discussion that a chairman of that will be a tenant. So there'll be tenant involvement and the general resident panel, but also the strategic so-called expert panel as well. There's going to be increased access to government. The government has promised more of a front-facing approach by the housing minister and people from the Department of Homes, Communities and Levelling Up, going out into the tenant community, taking part in more consultations, more roadshows, and being a much more visible voice across the country. And what you're also going to see as well is opportunities and empowerment program. This will be a selection of training opportunities and seminars and training events where, as involved tenants, you'll be able to get information, get the necessary skills to have your say with your landlord. And when will this be inspected? Well, there'll be a yearly desktop review that people have to take part in, and that will be responding to some of the things in the tenant satisfaction measures, and a minimum inspection of every 4 years. So let's have a look at the tenant satisfaction measures. What are they? There's a number, and they come under a lot of different categories. So let's have a look at this category now, which is keeping properties in good repair. One question that will be asked, so on the left-hand side, as you see it on the screen, one question that will be asked is homes that do not meet the decent home standard. That is one of the standards within the consumer standard bracket, and that will be measured directly by landlords. And one of the things we can discuss later is what the role scrutiny could play in measuring decent homes. There'll be repairs completed within target timescale, again measured by the landlord directly. Satisfaction with repairs. Now that's going to be something, one of the questions given within the tenant perception surveys, and they'll be asking tenants directly. Satisfaction with time taken to complete most recent repair. Whether they're taking it on time, whether it's being prompt with the information that you're receiving. Now, a lot of the next ones on maintaining building safety are being done directly by landlords. They have to ensure that they're taking their gas safety checks seriously, fire safety checks, asbestos, water, lift safety, and electrical safety. But as I mentioned earlier, that's not contained in the measures at the moment, but it will be added soon. And also satisfaction that the home is well maintained and safe to live in. Now, with the new satisfaction measures that were released, I think about 10 days ago, what's interesting to know is that they've split that question into two. And this was directly as a result of tenants that took part in the consultation. So there'll be a question now on the satisfaction that the home is well maintained, and also safe. Is the home safe? It will be two separate questions. The next section they'll ask tenants through surveys is the respectful and helpful engagement. Are you satisfied that the landlord listens to tenant views and acts upon them? Is there a satisfaction that the landlord keeps tenants informed about things that matter to them? Again, measured by doing tenant perception surveys. Agreement that the landlord treats tenants fairly and with respect. Now, what I found interesting looking at the responses to people that took part in the consultation about the tenant satisfaction measures and how they should be measured and what should go into them is a lot of people thought that the words fairly and with respect were actually quite subjective, and they wanted to know a bit more about how that was measured and what respect meant. So that's interesting, something we can bear in mind. Another one of the questions areas is to look at responsible neighbourhood management. Antisocial behaviour cases relative to the size of the landlord. Is there an abnormally large number? And that will be measured by landlords directly. The percentage of communal areas that meet required standards, again, measured by the landlords directly. And what I want you to think about when we go into discussion is a lot of these things here that are measured by the landlords directly. Do you as scrutineers see that information? Is that the type of thing you're seeing? And if so, do you think there's a way in which you as scrutineers can assist the landlord and tenants by looking at this information as it comes in and maybe noticing things that the landlord doesn't? Satisfaction that the landlord keeps communal areas clean, safe and well maintained will be measured by doing tenant perception surveys. Satisfaction that the landlord makes a positive contribution to neighbourhoods. That was something that in the survey was up for a lot of discussion as well, and some people argued whether it was the role of the landlords to do positive contribution to neighbourhoods or not, and caused a lot of debate. Satisfaction of the landlord's approach to handling of antisocial behaviour is again something that caused a lot of debate in the consultation. People expressed that there was a lot of tenant confusion on what the landlord could or couldn't do with regards to antisocial behaviour. And one of the things that the regulator has highlighted is that landlords have to improve how they communicate what they do and don't do with regards to antisocial behaviour, and what other agencies such as the police or the council and what powers they have. It has to be made a lot clearer working with different agencies. Another area of tenant satisfaction measures looks at the effective handling of complaints. Complaints relative to the size of the landlord. They want to know if there's an abnormally large amount of complaints relative to size. Complaints responded to within adequate timescales as well. So, are you ready? Do you feel that you, as scrutineers, have the relevant information to hand? What role, looking at those tenant satisfaction measures, do you think that you as scrutineers should and could be playing? So I'm going to split you into groups now, because the main thing about Scrutiny Club is the discussions that you have. Using the satisfaction measures as a guide, in groups, discuss what your scrutiny groups do to monitor and work with providers on keeping properties in good repair, maintaining building safety, respectful and helpful engagement. And I'll put these in the chat. I'll copy these and put these in the chat so you've got them. Respectful and helpful engagement, responsible neighbourhood management, and effective handling of complaints. Now, what I'd like when you split into groups is to look at what you do already, but bearing in mind what I've just talked about, which are going to be the new questions that are going to be directly asked of tenants and the landlord, what do you think additional to what you do already that you can do as a scrutiny group with your landlord to help the landlord and tenants with regards to these new measures? Right, I'm going to stop sharing now for a second. Now, is that clear to everybody what I'm asking? Please shout now if it isn't.
Oh, that's fine, as long as we've got them written down the side, because I've forgotten them already.
There's a lot. There's a lot. I warn you. Hold on. Right, so I'm gonna copy those and I'm gonna put them on. Let me just. So what I'll do is I'll split you into groups. Hold on, this was in chat. James Temple's put 10 perception surveys, RSH guidance and types of survey based on housing stock, percentage of tenant residents, responders required. Do you want to specify your question, James Temple? You put something in chat?
Thank you, Caritas. Yeah,
That's okay.
tenant perception surveys. Is the is the regulator for social housing providing guidance to landlords on the types of survey required? And the follow-up on that is based on housing stock, the percentage of tenant resident responders required to meet the regulator's standard, if there is one.
I can't answer you straight away on the percentage needed, but they have given us on the types of questions asked. And it's also a requirement that they have to prove that the sample size is specifically weighted towards the demographic of the tenant body for that provider. So if they get too much of one particular group or age range or something like that, then they have to weight it so it's more proportionate. And also the type of questions as well, they've specified. So they have to be general perception questions. So for example, with regards to repairs, there was a lot of landlords that said, could we just survey tenants on completion of repairs? And also, you know, those that have been through the repairs process and just filter it that way. So what they've done is they've said, that's fine. You can filter a question for those people that have had repairs done, but also we want to know what the general tenant population think about the repairs service. So there is a lot of guidance being given to them. The exact percentage return, I couldn't say. I will get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Right, let me split you into groups now. There is 24, so let's do 24. Right, I'll do 5 rooms and I'm going to give you probably about 15 minutes so we can all come back for a quick chat afterwards. So here we go. Send you into rooms now, and I'll put the questions in chat. You should disappear into rooms now. And for those watching on live stream, just to let you know, it is 2:03 now. If you come back at 2:18, we'll have this discussion in the main room. So thank you. Oh, hi, Keith. You're not in the room? Hi, Keith.
Caritas. Caritas.
Thank you, Lisa.
Hiya, are you able to go into room 4, please, to post the questions?
I will, no problem.
Fab, thank you.
Sorry about that.
You're right, Ricky.
Yeah, I'm here.
I think we're in a different room than everybody else.
Yeah.
And we're bringing everyone back now. What I normally get from people is, I was in the middle of saying something really interesting and you cut me off.
Usually the way.
Always the way. It's always the way with these things. But time is pressing. And this is a slightly shorter Scrutiny Club than normal. So we have a lot to fit in.
No, but we had a bad start. We lived alone.
Characters, can I just say something to Steve? Because we were just following what Steve just said in our group, in group 4. I think registered providers have to work in partnership when we're discussing neighbourhoods. And that's the key, that partnership with the local authority brings improvement to a registered provider scheme and the area around the scheme.
Come on.
Thanks.
Sorry, can I just a quick response to that? I don't know if Caritas remembers this, but when we were discussing this on a previous forum, the concern was what authority would the landlord have for areas outside of their boundaries if the other providers are not accepting their responsibility for it? You know, it's one of those that I agree to a certain extent. Everybody's got to work together, but if people don't work together, it could cause more problems. Sorry.
To answer your question, Steve, it is required in regulation that they work in partnership with other housing providers and statutory agencies like local authorities. So if it was demonstrated that they weren't effectively doing that, then it could be part of a report to the regulator. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I know it's too little time, but Sandy's in the waiting room. Let's get Sandy back in. But it would be interesting. I kind of dipped into some other people's conversations to actually know what you were talking about and sort of talking about the stuff that you were doing already with regards to the consumer standards and looking at how those things are going to be measured. What ideas sprung to mind that you could do for the future? So does anybody want to start kind of feeding back what you were discussing in your groups?
I'm happy to do group 1 if you want, Cara, to share.
Go for it.
Brilliant. Lovely ladies I was with, was Pauline and Barbara. It wasn't enough time. There you go. So we looked at the questions and we said keep it, because I did a screenshot because I couldn't remember them. Keeping properties in good repair. Pauline had just had an experience with doing some voids and what a sorry state of affairs the contractors had left. We sort of discussed it, and I'll further on, is that there seems to be a lot more knowledge of estate inspections. We've got estate supervisors and estate champions. Champions are freebies, they do it voluntary. Estate supervisors do it, which is to do with the external, but we don't know about good repairs internally. So unless we as a Scrutiny get to see voids, get to see the sort of repairs, and it sort of led us to think about, you know, maybe that's the sort of scrutiny we should start. Repairs is one of the ones that we were going to go on to at Live West, but next year. It's so big. So it's something that I think needs to be scrutinised, repairs. And at Live West, we've got direct labour force managed by Live West and paid by Live West. And then up north, as we call it, up here, Karis, we've got John West and things like that. So there's a thing there I can see that could be a standard, because sometimes when you're watched by the business, you're paid by the business, you're going to tick all the boxes. But sometimes I think contractors get quite complacent. So that was repairs. We then went on to maintaining building safety. And it was sort of a general conversation again, is that at the moment, and this is being blunt, I'm quite sick of safety and health and all that stuff, because it's all the time. The business is spending a fortune. They've set up departments. It's wonderful because of what's happened, that horrific thing. And we recently had a fire in Bristol, didn't we, Charities? So they are spending a lot of time committing themselves to the white paper and this health and safety and everything, and checking buildings and making sure. But one of the things that was raised also was that we get our alarms tested once a bit, but I don't know when they're coming. And I think Pauline raised and Barbara said we should have access to that either on the website or in our foyers on a notice board. We know when the cleaners come in. So safety was, I think the business is doing quite well, and I think Barbara and Pauline said the same. The next thing, respectful and helpful engagement. I said that Live West, our team's brilliant. And I think, again, Pauline and Barbara were okay about it. The only thing that we find, we were discussing, that respectful and helpful engagement, is that every business does not have a diverse involvement. You know, and again, sorry, detriment to people, I'm older, but we have a lot of older men and ladies that have retired that can, I think, spare the time. But there's not enough young people involved in Scrutiny, and there's not enough of the untouchable groups that aren't IT literate. And I think the businesses themselves can't keep making it as an excuse. They've got to work differently to get these people engaged. We had a young guy turn up one time to one meeting. He was brilliant. It was a breath of fresh air. And he was saying things like, oh my God, that's a really good idea, that we weren't thinking of, because I'm not new to IT, but I'm fairly confident in IT. So I think diversity is a big issue that they need to sort of get more involved to, you know, respectful and helpful engagement through that. The responsible neighbourhood management. Well, I was chatting to, again, Pauline and Barbara. We're just about to do a review for neighbourhood policy, and it touches on areas like grounds maintenance, cleaning, everything, all the sort of stuff you'd pay in a service charge and so on. And so they're looking at a policy to make sure they are doing this. So we're lucky that, and I said, well, why don't we try and get Pauline and Barbara, try and get them to give you their policy? There must be a policy somewhere about neighbourhood management. And like I say, we're just about to do a review on it. And the last one, effectively handling complaints. We did a review on complaints, and the business is doing it really quickly. A lot of us are on the ombudsman, so we're keeping an eye on them. And it's changed to what it was. It's better. There's still glitches because the paper process is reactive. And then when you ask the complaint to be sorted, the end bit's not done. It takes a while. So I'm about to complain about the complaints procedure. But I think that Barbara and Pauline said the same, that the complaints are okay. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eileen. That's quite comprehensive. That's very good. Thank you. Does anybody else want the feedback from their groups?
Ian?
Or someone being volunteered?
I think I've been volunteered. The thing I've noticed in our group, we had Katrina, Jane, Ricky, and myself, and some are quite far north, and others, like me, are down south in Worcestershire. But the thing we have in common is that we may be from council tenants, we may be Live West, got to mention again. It's obviously a very big provider. It's not the same with councils as it is with private, with housing association providers. And I've been involved myself with the council for quite a while here, in various kind of roles, unpaid. But so I've seen the council at work here. And I've only recently started to get involved in hearing how housing associations do things. But on the safety front, and on the trying to get information and things like that, I was given a very good steer here about contacting TPATH Connect, because I made the point that we're all doing a lot of work, but a lot of work has been done already and is being done similarly in different places. And if we can get contact with other outfits in various places, we can probably save ourselves a lot of time and a lot of trouble. I was on a group recently where we were able to, the council actually had got some of the reports provided by other providers in different parts of the country for us to look at. I mean, you can go online, but equally, if this TPAS Connect, and apparently Lisa is the one to contact, that would be a good start, because I think to some degree we're doing the same things in different places, and if we could cooperate better, we could probably save a lot of time and a lot of trouble.
Thank you. And yes, I could definitely plug TPAS Connect. There are several hundred people on that. It's a bit like an online Facebook for people, and there's a specific one for scrutineers. You can sign up, and yes, Lisa is the expert to contact with regards to that. I could also say as well that we have Scrutiny Club meetings once every quarter, so it's a great time. If this is your first time, please do come along to the next one as well, and make yourself a regular attender, because it's a great opportunity to actually network and find out what other people are up to. And you can get advice on when the next one is from Lisa, or looking at the TPAS website for when the next meeting is as well. But thank you. Is anybody, anything else to feedback from the group? Anybody else want to feedback when they talk about John Hook? I can see you.
I'll just feedback a little bit, and then Sandy's got a bit to say as well. One of the things that did crop up, and you're looking for something what your landlord is not doing, because we know with the Ombudsman getting more and more involved with complaint procedure, we think, well, I think, and Stella and Sandy agreed, that since we've got rid of the designated panel, and there's no option for the designated panel or the local councillor or your MP, I think they're missing a trick, because we're all getting KPI. We had X amount of complaints, X amount was upheld, X amount was rejected, X amount were partly upheld. That doesn't tell you nothing. We don't need to know people's names or anything like that. We just think that they should be some sort of tenant scrutiny, if you like, an ongoing scrutiny, say once a quarter. Look, hey guys, we're getting like 29 complaints for repairs and only 1 complaint for housing, that type of thing. Now there is no tenant input on complaints or complaints procedure. Thank you.
Do you think, John, or anybody else, that there are specific measures now on complaints? Do you think there's a role for scrutiny in that? That you talked about? Sorry, go on, John.
I think there's a role for tenants. It doesn't have to be scrutiny. It's just that now the tenant, okay, we've been sidelined. We've been sidelined. Whereas before there was an input. It didn't happen very often. You had a designated panel. When you got called on, it's very rare, but at least it was like a backstop. And it could be that you could nip some of these complaints in by making some suggestions from a bottom-up initiative rather than top-down. So that's my thoughts.
Stella, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Just to say that certainly the way we do this stuff is that we do inspect different areas, and complaints is one of the areas that we've inspected. And, you start with KPIs and policies and procedures and all the rest of it, as well as looking at housing ombudsman determinations and go from there, really. Then you're talking to residents that have made complaints, as well as interviewing staff members and making your recommendations that way. And to me, that's what's already there in regulation, in the Tenant Involvement and Empowerment Standard. It's already there. We should all be doing it. But yeah, whether other organisations enable that, I don't know. Be interested to hear.
Okay, I see Jane Bird next.
Thanks, Caritas. We at CHS have actually got a complaints panel, which is tenant-led. In fact, I'm the chair of our complaints panel, and Ruth, who you've got with us today as well, is also a member. And we are recognised as being sort of independent from CHS. So when a formal complaint comes to us, we look at it and then go back with our recommendations. Like Eileen, I'm on the Ombudsman resident panel, so we keep tabs on what's been going on. But we've just completed the code and the assessment form, so we are now compliant with his wishes.
Brilliant, thank you, Jane. And I've just
for those who don't know, characters before disappeared, John Goodwin has gone into semi-retirement.
Right.
Great
Okay,
day.
thank you.
Super bloke.
Thank you. Thank you. I also had from Sabina as well on chat that they have a complaints scrutiny forum for tenants at Yorkshire Housing as well. And Sandy, I see next. Sandy.
Hi, one of the things I did notice is we're doing a scrutiny on repairs at the moment. And one thing that's come up on a fair number of times is tenants that have turned around and said, we've complained, but it's gone no further. I said, what do you mean you've complained? Have you put in a formal complaint? Yes, I've complained, but what's happened is it's gone through to the service lead of that department for the repair, and it hasn't gone into a stage 1 complaint anywhere. So that person's been appeased and the complaint's gone. So we're led to believe that you're meant to make a complaint, any expression, and when you say formal complaint, there's no mistake in that. You want to make a formal complaint. So if it doesn't go through to the separate complaints department, it's going to those service lead areas and they're cancelling basically the complaint because they're appeasing it. That complaint is about a repair that could take months and the tenant is definitely not happy, but they're not in a stage 1 complaint. And now you can start to see where there's it's literally a loophole.
Can I come in there, Caritas?
You certainly can, Jane.
Just as a passing comment, yes, I totally agree with what Sandy's saying. But at the same time, if you actually say to your landlord, I wish to make a formal complaint, they then have to give you the option as to whether you want to bring it back to our complaints panel, and at the same time, they have to advise the complainant that they can go to the Ombudsman.
That's right. That would be the way and the method it's meant to go. But I'm talking about tenants who are phoning up because they're having a repair done. And in all honesty, they don't know anything else. So what they're doing is they're complaining and saying, I want to put this through as a formal complaint. But of course, they're in that repair area. So they're going to do as much as they can to appease the tenant. So it doesn't get passed into the official complaint system at stage 1. Yeah, and that, I think, is a loophole which many people may come across. If you can appease that, so it's still there as a slight loophole. And doing the complaint, the repairs scrutiny, it's actually brought this out a fair amount of times. So there is a loophole area there, because it's not just in one service area. The service area leads are the ones that are in control, whereas it should go into a complaint system. And as John said, then go out to the service lead. So it's registered as that complaint. But anyway, that's just one thing. But after doing this and seeing this several times, it is an actual loophole that maybe some landlords are using.
Do you, just before we go on to the next person, Sandy, do you think there is a way then, because you said that you've identified this in scrutiny, that scrutiny groups can actually act as the kind of oversight when it comes to these yearly returns that a landlord has to do?
When other landlords and that have got a complaint system in place, like they have a complaints area, then it has to be let known to those service leads that they don't handle that complaint till it comes back to them. So if somebody comes up with an expression of a definite, I want to put in a formal complaint, they don't sit on it and they don't do it themselves. They hand it through to their complaint section. The complaint section logs it and then hands it back to the service lead area, and then they deal with that properly. So at least that complaint has been registered, logged, and is working on, because that is a loophole there, and I think it is being used sometimes.
You're right.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. Ricky, you're next. Ricky.
We have somebody in our group, Katerina. There's 3 people in their family that actually have special needs. Not one person has actually mentioned things about people with special needs in the whole of the discussion of different groups. And the fact that to actually be assaulted, Katrina was just wondering, where does she go next? What can she do? You know, yes, this happened. The police, I think the police were involved, but things like people that work in the housing association should understand about people. You know, I remember coming back and being homeless. And I'd been in Africa and Sierra Leone. I had machine guns and machetes. The last thing I wanted was a wee room. You know, and that's in my side. But as a family, looking after people with special needs, the housing associations really have to get their act together and train their staff a lot better as well. Because the meetings that we had in Penrith, there was no mention of people with special needs. And in Cumbria, you know, that people are, it's infuriating the amount of people that are committing suicide because nobody will listen to them.
It's, yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily know how to reply to that, to say you're right. And, you know, when things like that are identified, you know, not just housing providers, but just all of us as a whole need to be a lot better, and statutory organisations, and how we identify people who are voiceless. You are absolutely right, Ricky, and how we do that. I hope, I'm a hopeful person, I hope that in the consumer regulation, that the respectful aspect, that their respect, being treated with respect, is properly looked at, and those people that you mentioned in the example you gave, that can be identified, and when it's failing, that can be noted as well, and that action can be taken speedily. And I hope that when it comes to respect, it's not just about a home, is it? It's about people's lives and how they're treated. And yeah, I'm totally with you on that, Ricky. Eileen, you had your hand up next.
Hi, Karen. Yeah, I mean, touching on what that gentleman's just said, I mean, the key words now are equality, equity, and inclusion. And if they haven't got a policy that supports that person's needs, then they're failing as a business, because, you know, we're not just people in a house, we're customers. What Live West likes calling them customers. I say I'm a resident, you know, and that thing should not go on, is appalling. Going back to, we're very fortunate. I think sometimes I've known about our lot, but every week, every quarter, we have the what they call a dashboard. And the dashboard tells us how the business is doing with customer repairs, customer service, all that sort of stuff, you know, neighborhoods and so on. And we get to do that. And we also get to see the tenant satisfaction measures that they must fill in every, I don't know, did you say how many times, Karen? I forget.
Once a year.
That's it. We go through that and we say we don't agree with that. You say you've done it. We don't think you have. So we actually get to scrutinize that before they send it off. And then they come back to us with a response. And they usually 9 times out of 10 alter what we said. So we're very lucky at measuring. I think a lot of, and going back to the complaint side that people are talking about, is that years ago, Live West used to call it an expression of dissatisfaction. And it used to wind me up because it's a complaint, no matter what you want to label it. So now they've taken that EDI, or they call it, off. I've done a complaint recently about the ground maintenance. We get a key guy who deals with, I don't think we've got a board or a panel. We get a key guy that responds to that. We can do it through the portal, the website, pick up the phones. There's several ways of making a complaint. And there's a key guy that takes that complaint, gives you a brief letter back of what you're saying, and then they hand it to a person to deal with it. Now I'm dealing with a senior housing officer with the complaints, because there was 3 of them. So the process is good here, but it seems as though a lot of complaints is still an area, listening to all these lovely people here today, that really the businesses have got to comply with all this, because the white paper is strict on it. And I don't know why some of these businesses are failing. I still think there's areas we could do, but our scrutiny on the complaints procedure, after doing it and doing the recommendations to the board, they sat up and went, oh yeah, okay. So I think sometimes the business just gets away with it too much, unless you, like we've done a scrutiny. And maybe one of the key things is to scrutinize the complaints process. I don't know. That's just comments on everything, Caritas. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Eileen. And Pauline Dipple, you're next.
Oh, hi. My comments on both things, repairs and again, touching on what that gentleman said. I've been banging on for about a year that I feel that there should be, as we've been made aware, we haven't seen any evidence, and this is another thing that I think when the white paper becomes a bill, maybe we'll get more evidence and feedback and results, because why haven't we all got an ambassador for vulnerable and disabled people? Why hasn't every council and housing association got there's ambassadors for this and ambassadors for that? But to me personally, there are so many different vulnerable people in the world and in our country that there should be an ambassador in every single council and housing association. Going on to complaints, at the moment there's a group of us, we're going through the complaints process, lessons learned. I find it quite bizarre because as I was saying in our group chat, if you were with a bank or any other service provider, you wouldn't put up with the service. And I don't understand why if a contractor misses an appointment, why it's felt £10 if you've took the whole day off of work and you've stayed in all day waiting for someone, or third time the repair's still not done and the guy turns up with no tap. And this is what we're going through at the moment. So I'm really hoping that we are going to come to a better arrangement when people or people turn up, say for instance, they have got it logged that a person is vulnerable and needs 2 people to attend and only 1 person attends. There's no empathy. I've found in sample letters, there's no empathy or consideration that what that person's gone through. So yeah, we've got a lot of work to do.
Absolutely. That's very true. Sabina, you're next.
Hi, I just wanted to add to what the previous gentleman said earlier on about, people with different needs. And I mean, it would be good to have some sort of equality and diversity officer in post, who looks at that right from when somebody's making an application, to registering on their system that this person has moved in and they have these needs and they need this support, and these are the people that are working with them, other organisations. And to be fair, sort of our housing association do have equality and diversity and inclusion, because it's just not about ethnicity, and people have hidden disabilities as well. And, so they're quite good, because every month they have a topic for staff to get an insight from somebody outside coming in and talking about, say, autism. If you have a client who's autistic, how do you support that client? So the housing association's doing that quite well. The other thing about complaints that came up, it's an ongoing issue because we've been doing complaints at housing associations since I think 2017, and it goes back some to the basic again, you know, where there's no communication, or when staff are responding, there's no empathy and no understanding of what the person has gone through. So to me, that's a training need for staff, and that's something that we fed back to them. And to look at, you know, can we as a panel be involved in that training to, you know, get some customer voices in there about, you know, and even some of the letters that are sent out, you know, I look at some and I think that they're not consistent because people, I don't know if they have training, but they've got no empathy in there. And things like somebody's just complained to you and then you've written at the end of the letter, I hope you're happy with this outcome. You know, it needs to be worded correctly. And I think staff are a bit, you know, those staff are a bit removed away from the customers. So yeah, just really to add that.
I think that's a really valid point, Samina, and I think it's about one of the things that comes up in a lot of conversations I've been having recently is about changing some cultures and changing how people think about things and how people approach things. And hopefully, I'm hoping with new regulation that it will create more conversations and move towards a change in some cultures. Not everybody is like that. You know, there are people who get it, but, you know, I think conversations need to be had. Eileen, you're next.
Sorry to come back, characters. It's quite interesting because I just had a day away yesterday and we were doing equality and diversity and stigma. Brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. But the thing now that the housing associations have got to do is put inclusion. There was a picture on the wall. I looked at the picture and I saw there was 3 people. There was a 6-foot guy, a smaller woman and a young boy. And there was a barrier. And it was only the 6-foot guy that could see over it. The next picture was the same barrier. And this was equity. The word equity does my head in. And 2 steps for the young child, 1 step for the lady, and the bloke could still see over it. The man could still see over it. And that was equity. Inclusion, get rid of the barrier. And that's what a load of housing associations, lots of housing associations don't do. They don't go further. And with this, like that gentleman was saying earlier on, I don't know if we've got an equality and diversity person, but they've got to sit back sometimes and go further and think about how can we make this inclusive for everybody, but to make sure that we're putting people with disabilities or anything. So it was brilliant training. Stigma is one of the things that, you know, we were talking about repairs. I think one of the things that a lot of, and I don't know whether it's because of money, one of the worst things that you get is if you look at a quality building, people go, social housing or council. I get about the repairs, but they've got to think about making the buildings look nice, because people will go, oh God, you know, or there's a dump car outside or something. And I think one of the things that these businesses lack is actually taking a look at the external stuff as well and the common areas. You know, people get embarrassed when they bring someone in and there's graffiti all over the wall. We haven't got it here, you know, but so the actual stigma one that we did on the day was absolutely brilliant. And going back to the complaints again, characters, I think just to refresh again, since we did that scrutiny, I really do think that Live West have improved on its complaints. You know, it was a very in-depth scrutiny and we were whipping the old whatever you want to say. I don't want to say the word because it's a swear word. We were saying to the board, you know, you take these recommendations on. And it seems a lot of the businesses I'm listening to today, I seem sad for them that they haven't got that far. I'm very lucky at Live West that we've got further. Whether it's working, we don't know. We've got to come have some feedback, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Eileen. Pauline, is that an old hand or a new hand up?
Sorry, my
that's all right. Don't worry.
Completely bonky. I don't know what's going on.
Don't worry. I just wanted to make sure you weren't being left out. Someone asked a question in group, and it's just come up in the smaller group. It came up again about, you know, the responsibility of landlords to reach out to as many different groups and sort of different types of groups within their tenant body, and it's actually a requirement, and it was put in the satisfaction measures, that there is a requirement for them for a landlord to demonstrate that they're using lots of different methods to reach out to people. So someone mentioned in a smaller group about if you're just doing things digitally, how you're going to get to everybody. And it is a requirement that, for example, you know, I'm not stereotyping, not everybody older, because, you know, has problems with digital. But, you know, to reach out to older people, to reach out to the people with certain educational needs, they've got to demonstrate that they're taking things like the tenant surveys seriously and doing it in different ways. So including face-to-face interviews, community events, things like that. So that's actually included. And hopefully we'll start to see more of that than is going on previously, though I know lots of landlords do it. Sandy.
Yes, sorry, it's really quick. I know what when I talk about the complaints and that, it does sound as though I'm knocking our landlord, but actually our landlord has done an awful lot of stuff and work with us, and they've given us far more leeway now than I've ever known in tenant engagement in the last 3.5 decades. So I know we've come across this problem because we're doing the scrutiny. That's what scrutiny is about. And it's quite a bad area to suddenly come across what can be perceived as a loophole within it. But a landlord by themselves are actually doing so much work with us and allowing us to be totally tenant-led in many different areas, which has never happened before. So for that, I'm eternally grateful for engagement, because it's allowed us a lot more different opportunities. Thanks.
Thank you. And John Hook.
Yeah, this is just a bit of information for people, Eileen and a couple of others, for one of the minority groups, the older person, TPAS and EROSH have been collaborating together, and they've just produced a digital guide for landlords how to engage the older person digitally, and that will be available soon.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for the plug, John. That's fantastic. We are rapidly coming to time now. What I wanted to just take a sense of from people is, as scrutineers, we've been talking about the white paper, we've been talking about the tenant satisfaction measures. Are you involved in these conversations with your landlord? Have they approached you and talked about how they're going to be, you know, servicing and working on these requirements in the future? Have you had these conversations? I'm just interested if people have. Eileen, first.
Yeah, we have a quarterly meeting, Caritas, and we do this customer satisfaction stuff. We look at a chart with the complaints and everything else on it all the time. We get lots of information, lots of data. Sometimes it's data overload, but we get time to look at it.
Eileen, have they been talking specifically about the new bill, though, and how they're going to be working on that?
Oh, yes. I mean, they did a whole section on the white paper. We attended a lot of meetings about it. They did a presentation. They sent us the links, because I don't know, Caritas. I'm one of these ones, I cannot read something that's 67 pages long. So they've done a huge section on it for us. So I'm really lucky that, you know, Live West are really getting on board with a lot of this, and they're listening to us. You know, a lot of us still bashing at them and saying, come on, and we throw loads of stuff at this. Some of us, like me and another lady, Barbara, they're on their case all the time. And I sometimes think, oh God, it's her again. That's what they're saying. But no, I don't care. Yes, they do. They're very, very good. Thank you.
That's very good. And someone else has put in the chat as well. I think it's Steve that they do as well. Anybody else? James Temple? James? You're on mute, James. There you go.
There we go. I'm open again. I just wanted to say, following up on what was mentioned earlier, I've just put the Good Practice Guide. It was published last week. I've just put it in the chat if anyone wants to download it. Listening to everybody talking about complaints and issues about whether a complaint is a complaint, or is it just feedback? The Housing Ombudsman is very clear that residents can make a complaint in just about any form they like. They can make a complaint on Twitter, they can make a complaint on Facebook, per email, per telephone, and the housing association or registered provider has to log that as a complaint and not as feedback. So it's very important that as scrutineers, we make sure that in any resident magazines, there is a continual update in each publication on complaints and how to go about making your complaint. I think that's key. It's educating all of the residents how easy it is to make a complaint. And I think that's really important. It's something we miss quite often. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to give the final question now. Someone's just put in the chat, and I do apologise if I say your name wrong, Remikus. Brilliant. He says, hi, how can we encourage landlords to communicate better with contractors for repairs and complaints? Can anybody help here? Does anybody have an example of how they effectively work with contractors and landlords? I mean, I can practically give some examples of what I've had is that people where I've worked previously, there's been contract monitoring groups of tenants that actually monitor the contract of a contractor that's contracted out services by a landlord, and they actually regularly meet with the contractors. So when I worked for Norwich City Council, I worked with tenants that would regularly meet with contractors and monitor how they were performing. I've got a couple of hands up. I will go to Jane first. Jane?
Absolutely, Caritas. Yes, we have groups. We have a group of tenants who sit on Gasway Core Group, which meets quarterly. We have the same for our maintenance people. We also do it for a gardening contract. We have tenants on that. We're going to be more involved in new contracts, procurement and that sort of thing starting next year. So yes, we are definitely very involved.
And I will give the final word to Eileen. Eileen.
We don't have anything, Carol. We don't have, when it was Knightstone, I don't know if everyone knows, we used to have Knightstone and Dorset and Cornwall Housing. They merged and it's now Live West. It's 39,000 properties. I think the biggest in the Southwest. We used to attend contractors meeting, but I think Live West is moving to direct labour force. So at the moment, there is actually no way we just go through the complaints procedure, but to have a suggestion like that, ladies just said about actually having, why don't we attend contractors meetings? Why don't we attend direct labour forces? Maybe that's a good suggestion. I'll put that forward to them, because then we could feed back to the scrutiny group, and maybe there's an area we need to scrutinise. Well, we know we need to scrutinise repairs, but they're putting that off because it's going to be massive. So that's a good suggestion from that lady. Sorry, I didn't see the lady's name.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. And that is it, people. Thank you so much for making this one of the, they're always enjoyable, but this really quite insightful Scrutiny Lives and Scrutiny Club meetings. Enjoy the rest of Scrutiny Week. For those of you that are going to Nottingham on Wednesday for the Scrutiny Conference, I look forward to seeing you. And I'll be doing an opening presentation on how scrutiny is like Star Trek. So look forward to that.
It's too far. I'd love to go up, but it's too far for me. But
for those,
thank you so much.
Beat me up, Scotty.
Yeah, well, I'll teleport you away. But thank you so much for coming. Please go to the other sessions of the week. If you're on social media, talk about it. What you do individually is amazing. And take this away, you're amazing individuals that do a lot for your community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
See you soon, neighbour.
Bye, everybody.